Good evening, members. Welcome to this Audit Committee meeting at Tuesday, the 10th of December. I just want to welcome all elected members, our independent member, Jonathan Corsten, officers and internal audit partners. I think we've got Max from BDO this evening and Mark and Jenny from Mazars. Can I have any apologies for absence? I think we've got a full house. Yeah, thank you. Item 2, we'll move to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of September. Are members happy to approve the minutes as a correct and accurate record? I'm happy to move them. Councillor Hunt seconded. All those in favour? Yeah. Okay. Item 3, then we'll move on to the declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest to make? None? Okay, thank you. Item 4, we'll move to the Audit Completion Report 2021-22. It's a report of the external auditors, Mazars, but first I'm going to ask Tina Adams to lead, our officer, and then Mark to present Appendix 1. Tina, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This first set of reports that we're talking about is relating to the Statement of Accounts for 2021-22. It's to inform members of the key findings from the Mazars external auditors' audit work. It's a requirement that the Council's financial statements are audited on an annual basis and that in addition the auditors undertake all work necessary to support their conclusion on value for money. In 21-22, Mazars had initially undertaken a significant amount of audit work on the 21-22 financial statements. However, in July 2022, the Council uncovered a significant fraud which led to a revision of the audit strategy and the testing that was required by the internal audit. Additional audit procedures were carried out, but due to the additional testing required and the complexity of the fraud and the introduction of the backstop date of the 13th of December 2024, this meant that Mazars had insufficient time to perform all the necessary procedures to provide assurance and complete their audit. For this reasons, as stated above, Mazars have issued their report now and it will be a disclaimer of opinion in respect of the 21-22 audit. I'm just going to pass you on to Mark now from Mazars to go through that initial report.
Thank you. So I'll take a little bit more time over the 21-22 report because it forms a foundation of everything that follows as a consequence for that. Tina's given a really good overview of where things were at. We're issuing an audit completion report which sets out that we had completed the majority of the work, but the fraud that arose had a number of impacts, which, given the sensitivity around it, obviously couldn't come in full form to the committee. We had to do things that weren't in the public domain in order to not to prejudice any ongoing investigation. The fraud itself fundamentally impacted an aspect of our audit which we call the management override of controls, where we ordinarily design tests designed to address the risk of material fraud. And this is set out on page 18 of the new pack, where essentially we took additional steps to review the effect at a holistic level in the financial statements, but also change what we call the inherent risk of transactions. And that essentially means that we extended our testing. We did a lot more testing because there was a higher inherent risk that they could have been susceptible to the fraud, whether it was identified or potentially, because we have to come at this independently, whether there were any other transactions. As well as updating testing we did around journals and entries into the ledger, as well as the IT controls, planning and risk, a whole suite of additional testing. So we commenced that earlier in, I think, January of this year, but as it evolved, the complexity, and as the complexity of the fraud became more and more apparent, Combined with the backstop date being implemented, we felt as though the complexity requires specialist input, and the extent of specialist input would not be complete by the backstop date, and hence we're in a place where we don't believe we'll be able to issue we will be issuing what we call this disclaimer of opinion on 21-22 accounts. There is no opinion, and it will flow through on the accounts that way, and over time we will move into the rebuilding assurance phase. But for 21-22, we are saying we cannot issue an opinion because we have not completed our work. That's fundamentally it around the financial statements. Our other responsibilities sit under what's called the value for money arrangements, which are arrangements in place to look at economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and financial sustainability and governance. In particular, the effect of the fraud affects what's called the governance criteria. And those are essentially a suite of controls and processes that are in place to manage, prevent and detect fraud. Because there has been a fraud, there is clearly something that we have to report against that. It's called, under this terminology, it's called a significant weakness in arrangements. And essentially, in our view, we've taken the work that has been done by internal audit earlier on, looked at the work that we've done earlier on in the year, and ultimately we need to reflect externally what has happened, and we call it a significant weakness that occurred in 2022. It was relevant to the financial year ending March 2022. It is also relevant to the year ending March 2023 because of the timing of which the prosecution went through. So there wasn't enough time from the point at which the fraud was identified that the controls to be remedied. You can't go back in time. They weren't remedied until later on. So in our 22 report, we will say there is a significant weakness in governance arrangements arising as a result of the fraud. That's fundamentally it. That is where we get to on the 22 accounts. There's a few governance steps that the committee will need to go through in terms of approving the accounts, as well as accepting so that they can be signed off, and we receive what's called a management representation letter, which sets out aspects, confirmations from officers that they've given us all that we need in order to complete the work that we have done. And I will pause at that point on the 22 year end.
Okay, so based on that information that's been presented, do members have any comments or questions on the reports that are attached or from the presentation? Yeah. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. I think the only comment I would like to make, and I'm sure lots of other members would agree, we've had this, an hour? It's 400 pages. Can you give us some assurances that in future we will have more time to read the material, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. I understand that they were emailed out this morning and that the physical copies were handed to us this afternoon or this evening. Do recognise and accept your concerns, and we will ensure that in future reports are issued with plenty of notice and plenty of time to allow members to scrutinise, although I would say that a large majority of the reports information contained in these reports are historical and have been previously available on the council's website. So, however, we do accept what you're saying about making sure members have more time. We will work on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. There's another.
Councillor Greensmith.
I'd just like to add that I've been at work all day, so I've not even had the opportunity to look at these accounts at all. I appreciate you saying that the information has been out there prior to this meeting, but how can I know that without actually reading and looking at these accounts. I do think not being able to look at this in any format prior to this meeting is not good governance. And it's not fair on members at all.
Point taken, Councillor Greensmith, although I do believe you've been a member of this committee for some time, and this information has come to the committee in various formats previously. We have had a discussion about making sure that this type of information is made available in future with more time, so that members can have time to go over the paperwork, etc. And we'll make sure as well that for the next meeting, we're hoping to have a pre-meet before the meeting to give members even more time to be able to go over and ask any questions or raise any concerns or issues. So we'll work on it, and we're doing what we can. There are some tight deadlines, as we discussed earlier, but we'll get there. Thank you for raising your concerns. On agenda item 4 also, we need to note that members, note that Mazars external audit. Yes. Do you want me to move the recommendations that were set out in the main agenda? I think we need to do that, don't we?
Just that bit first.
Okay. So the first item that we need to approve are the recommendations that members note the Mazars external audit report for 21-22. I'm happy to move that recommendation. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Barnes has seconded. All those in favour? Any abstentions? Councillor Greensmith. So Tina's going to continue through the items that are presented.
So the next report I'm going to talk to you about is the annual governance statement and the statement of accounts. Now, to acknowledge that we are bringing a phenomenal amount of information to you at this audit committee. It is a very unprecedented year because of the backstop, and we would normally have done this much, much earlier. We are looking at financial statements here that are actually 3 years old, so I do acknowledge that. The accounts and audit regulations require that the Council conduct a review of the effectiveness of the system and internal controls, and to prepare an annual governance statement and a statement of accounts. Now, in normal circumstances, the regulations require these to be completed by the 31st of May. However, due to the fraud that we've recently spoken about being identified in July 22, Mazars was unable to complete their audit, as they had insufficient time to carry out the necessary procedures and assurance to complete the audit. That's why this set of financial statements has been so delayed coming to you. The finalised statements is now being presented to you for approval. Now, these statements have been to previous committees. They are on the Council's website. They are published as unaudited on the website, and they have been through public consultation. So the accounts now should be considered, giving due regard to any comments which Mazars made in their external audit report. In addition to the annual governance statement and the statement of the accounts, the Council is required to prepare a narrative statement which includes comment on the Council's financial performance and economy, effectiveness and efficiency for that year. And this forms part of the statement of accounts. I'm not going to go through all of the statement of accounts information in this report because, as I say, it's quite historical. It's now 3 years old. There's just a couple of things that really we need to note. One is that there was no major changes to accounting code of practice in 21-22. The general balance as at the 31st of March 2022 was 4.6 million, which indicates that we were operating as a going concern. And the only other significant item in there was that the pension deficit actually decreased by 18.6 million during the year 21-22. As part of this report, so attached to Appendix 1 is the annual governance statement. Now, you have seen this twice already at Audit Committee. I do believe it came either last time or the time before in its draft format. This is now the final version and presented to you for approval. The statement of accounts is at Appendix 2, and that also comes to you for approval. As I said, this is already publicised on the website and has been for a long time and has already been through public consultation. And Appendix 3 is a draft letter of representation, which is basically a letter to Mazars, which discharges my duty and my responsibilities in relation to that audit. The draft letter is attached to Appendix 3. We have now had final wording from Mazars on that letter, so I think a later one was sent out to you, and we do have it to hand out if it hasn't already been done so at this meeting. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from members? No? Okay. I'm going to move the recommendations. What I'll do, I know it's long-winded, but I'll read them out for people who may be watching and members of the public. The recommendations are that 1, members approve the annual government statement for 2021-2022, which I think we've just done, well, we've noted the Mazars report. Item 2, subject to approval of the annual government statement at recommendation 1, members approve the statement of accounts for 2021-2022, which is Appendix 2. Item 3, members note the narrative statement on pages 3 to 18 of the statement of accounts for 2021-2022, Appendix 2. And item 4, members agree the letter of representation, which is Appendix 3. So I'm happy to move all of those recommendations on block. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnes has seconded. All those in favour? Yeah. Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, so that's all approved. So we'll move on to the next item. So item 5, we'll move on to the Combined Audit Strategy Memorandum and Completion Report for 2022-2023. This is the report of the external auditors, again, Mazars, and to lead Tina Adams, to be followed by Mark at Mazars to present Appendix 1. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Chair. So this set of accounts that we are now talking about is the statements for the years 2022 and 2023. So under normal circumstances, Mazars would normally report their results of their planning work, including the significant risks identified and the planned procedures in the Audit Strategy Memorandum. Results of the audit would also be presented in the Audit Completion Report. However, as a result of the backstop arrangements, Mazars are reporting a combined audit strategy and completion report for 2022-23. So in exactly the same circumstances as the 21-22 accounts, the identification of the fraud in July 2022 meant that Mazars wasn't unable to complete their significant testing and provide assurance on the 22-23 accounts. And due to the backstop arrangements again, the accounts have been brought forward as disclaimed. And I'm now going to hand over to Mark to present the report for 22-23.
Thank you. So even though we're planning to issue a disclaimed opinion and confirm the accounts have not been audited, there are still certain requirements and steps that we have to run through, which includes the issuance of this report to confirm that we have performed what we consider the minimum level of procedures to get to that place in itself. Those are fundamentally set out in the report, which include, I think I've got page 197 of the pack, which essentially is to confirm a lot of the work we do around planning and risk assessment, understanding the entity, looking at accounting policies, as well as making a number of inquiries with management and completion of all of our work under the value for money assessment for 22-23. The rest of the report sets out some of the logistical matters that we're required to include, confirming that we intend to issue a disclaimer of opinion for 22-23. There is reference again to the fraud, as I mentioned previously. The fraud was identified in July 22. That is part of the 22-23 financial year, and therefore it must be included in that period. It may also roll forward into 23-24, but for this period it is essentially, whilst it says it's still there, it's a continuation of exactly the same theme, so nothing new to add. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Are there any comments or questions from members in relation to this item? Councillor Hughes. Councillor Hughes, sorry, just pop your microphone on.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm just clarifying what the recommendation is, because certainly in the what I've got in front of me here, it's we've got recommendations that members receive the report, and then there's another bullet point that says note the, without actually saying what it is we're noting. So I'm just a little confused.
Because this is a joint report, so the previous years was just to note, because this is a joint report, which is the audit strategy and the completion report, it's basically just to receive and note the completion part of the report, and then the audit strategy report part of the report will go to, will be referred to full council for information at a future date.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any other comments or questions from members? No, so I'm happy to move the recommendations that we've got here then, on the first item, which is that members receive the report to approve the Mazars external audit strategy for 2022-2023 and refer the report to the full council for information. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. Any seconders for that? Councillor Barnes, thank you. All those in favour? Just one abstention. We'll now move on to the next part of agenda item 5 then. Tina?
Thank you, Chair. So again, this report is exactly the same as the one before, but for the statement of accounts for 22-23. It brings forward the annual governance statement for 22-23, which Audit Committee have seen previously in its draft format. It now brings that forward in its final version for approval. It brings forward the statement of accounts for approval, and then also again the narrative statement to note, and the letter of representation for 22-23 from Mazars, which again discharges my responsibility as section 151.
Are there any further comments or questions from members on this? No? Okay, I'm happy to again move the recommendations en bloc. I'll read them out again for members of the public at home. The recommendations are that 1, members approve the annual governance statement for 2022-23, Appendix 1. 2, subject to approval of the annual governance statement at recommendation 1, members approve the statement of accounts for 2022-2023, Appendix 2. Number 3, members note the narrative statement on pages 3 to 18 of the statement of accounts for 2022-23, Appendix 2. And 4, members agree the letter of representation, Appendix 3. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnes, thank you. All those in favour? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's passed. So we'll now move on to, there is an item 6. I just wanted to say that we've got value for money and progress report. The report of the external auditors, again, Mazars. Tina, did you want to speak on this, or is this Mark? I think you've already covered it, really, haven't you? Did you want? Yeah, okay.
So one of the responsibilities we have as your external auditor is to produce what's called an auditor's annual report, of which the body of which is this progress report, which we intend just to finalise by adding a one additional page to the front of this, which says that we've presented it to this committee. What it does is it covers both the financial year March 22 and March 23, setting out our responsibilities and findings under value for money, confirming that we've looked at the council's arrangements for financial sustainability, planning and monitoring its financial plans. We've looked at governance, and that's where there is a section that, again, repeats that the fraud occurred. But we also look at performance monitoring and performance management arrangements in the authority. The rest of the report chunks it up into those sections, telling you what we looked at and whether or not we believe the arrangements were adequate. So under financial sustainability, we've looked at how the council's financial governance arrangements were in place, its use of balances, the medium-term financial plan, budgetary control, budgetary financial planning, and the level of underlying reserves, doing a little bit of benchmarking compared to other local authorities to conclude that there is no significant weakness in arrangements for financial sustainability. Except for the identified fraud, we also looked at aspects around risk management and internal control under the theme of governance, and there were no issues arising. We also looked at performance management and procurement and partnerships under the improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness theme, and again confirmed there were no issues arising. So whilst there was the fraud, which will feature as a significant weakness, there is broader level of assurance that comes out from those other areas for the authority to take.
This item is for information, but I am happy to open it up to members for any comment or questions. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Chair. It's just clarification, really. I did manage to read all of this report. When you were talking about reserves, I think, I'm just looking to see if I can find the page number, but I can't. So there's different sections of reserves, one of which is a general fund balance. Would I be correct in saying that it's gone from 5.16 million in reserve to just over £750,000 in 4 years? And if so, does that mean that the council has used up £3.5 million of its reserves in 4 years? And if so, is that not a cause for concern?
Tina?
So in 21-22, the general fund balance was about 4.6 million. That was down to just over £1 million in 22-23. So we did use up a significant amount of our reserves in 22-23. In 23-24, that actually went back up to, I think, about 3.5 million, but don't quote me on that. I'll get you the right amount. But this is all, it is all reported as part of the outturn reports, and will be in the outturn reports. So currently we do have an okay balance of reserves at the moment. So to designate ourselves as a going concern. Reserves are like a piggy bank. They do dwindle. I think we have mentioned this previously before, that we are relying on our reserves to balance our budget, but we do continue to report that through both quarterly monitoring and our outturn reports.
Okay, thank you.
I think I did read somewhere in the report that comparatively, compared to other councils across the country, we are actually in a good place with our levels of reserves. But anyway, we'll move forward. Are there any other comments or questions from members? No? Okay, there's no recommendation from this, so we'll move on to item 7, the annual governance statement 2023-2024. And this is a report of the Chief Finance Officer and Section 15 Officer, Tina Adams.
Thank you, Chair. So yet another annual governance statement for this evening. So this one relates to 2023-24. Now, this is the first time you've actually seen this annual governance statement. It's coming to you in its draft format. So the annual governance statement, it's not previously been reported to you due to the identification of the fraud that we spoke about. So we are quite late doing our statements again this year. Everything kind of like has been delayed from 21-22 onwards. The annual governance statement is all about internal control. It proposes that the annual governance statement for 23-24 is noted and that comments be provided for inclusion in the final version of the annual governance statement that will be presented to Audit Committee for approval with the annual statement of accounts later in the financial year. This will be in February next year. The date will be shortly confirmed to you. It's a statutory requirement for authorities under the Accounts and Audit Regulations, which requires authorities each financial year to conduct a review of the effectiveness of their systems of internal control and prepare an annual governance statement in accordance with proper practices in relation to the accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Do members have any comments or questions on this item? Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, and probably for Tina. On page 19, I read on section 6.3, the assurance from exec managers, it's saying about emerging issue relating to a challenge received with possible non-compliance with legal responsibilities in the area of public protection income. Is it possible to just go into a bit more detail there and what our non-compliance is?
So we had an instance of taxi licensing where we wasn't actually reporting our licensing correctly, and we was looking at our surplus or deficit over the whole of the taxi licensing. All different types of licenses, where actually we had a requirement to do memorandum accounts for each separate license. We have since rectified that. We made a provision in our earmark reserves to pay back any taxi drivers for licenses where we were actually making a surplus. So we have actually rectified that. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, Fran? So, okay.
Any other comments or questions from members on this item? No. Oh, Councillor Strong.
Bearing in mind that this report is from last year, I was looking at review of progress on paragraphs 7.3.1 and 7.3.2, which concerned staff numbers and morale impacting the services. Do I take it that this is now different? Because I've not had a lot of time to read this bit. So the efficiency savings. Workforce capacity being impacted by increased service demand and a shortage of professionals. I know that we've had some changes of staff recently. Do I take it that is now?
So we do still have, so the labour market has been really difficult over the past few years, particularly in terms of professional staff. So we've had problems across areas like legal services, financial services, planning professionals. It is getting better, but there are still some issues, particularly in the finance market. There's just not people coming through. We've done a lot of work looking at our terms and conditions, how we can attract people into the workforce. We've got a new assistant director who's working across the HR function, and we're looking at ways that we recruit people. So that should hopefully, when we get through to kind of like the current financial year, we should be seeing some movement on that and some progress. Fran, have you got anything you wanted to add on that?
That answers your question, Councillor Hunt. Thank you. Okay, I can't see anyone else indicating, so I'm going to move us to the recommendations then. I'm happy to move the recommendations that we note the draft annual governance statement 2023-24 and provide any comments for inclusion in the final version when presented to the Audit Committee with the annual statement of accounts 23-24 later in the financial year. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hunt, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Yeah.
I've just got an update on a question that was asked earlier about the general fund balance. So for 23-24, it was 4.9 million.
Thank you for the update.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, the internal audit follow-up report. And I think we've got Max from BDO. Max, are you leading on this? Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting the next 2 reports on your agenda pack. So I'll start with the follow-up. I'll pause for any questions or comments there before moving on to the progress report. So the follow-up report sums up the progress made in implementing recommendations raised in our previous audit reports, but also audit reports going back several years where incomplete. So there were 7 recommendations due for this committee. Of those, 1 are complete and the remaining overdue, albeit it's pretty key to note that within those overdue recommendations, 4 relate to procurement. As you can see from the management comments, the council is currently sort of reassessing and looking at its options to how it continues its procurement function, which should rectify some of those recommendations. That's a brief summary of that report, so I'll stop there for any questions or comments.
Any comments or questions from members? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the recommendations, particularly the overdue recommendations, I think most of them seem to have had numerous due dates that have been crossed out. So, for example, on page 37, asset management was December 22, then it was November 23, June this year, and then finally December, as in this month. And that seems to have happened with practically all of them, which obviously is why they're overdue. Are we, not necessarily a question to you, are we reasonably confident that most of these, particularly the ones due this financial year, we are actually going to finally hit these particular dates? Are they going to be further delayed?
There's a number of reasons for delays and strike-throughs. Sometimes, I can't go into detail on every single one. Sometimes it's down to capacity. Sometimes it's down to changes in law, which mean we have to adapt a different approach. As has been mentioned, we're taking quite a new approach in terms of procurement, and we've had a new risk management strategy, a new risk approach as well, which is taking some time to embed. In terms of asset management, I suppose we know there needs to be improvement in that space. So part of the actions we're looking at is a new asset management plan and asset management system to properly and effectively track our management of assets. We've recently, in SLT as well, received a report around, at the minute, we have assets that are under different ownership. So we have leisure centres which sit with leisure. We have other assets that sit with property services. We also have our temporary accommodation stock, which sits with housing. We're bringing all those together so we can map effectively in terms of inspections and so forth on a more combined approach instead of dotted across the council. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment. So that's why that date for December 24 has been put in relation to that. All these things take money. So in terms of acquiring a new asset management system, there is a cost associated with that. But we're doing a lot of work as part of our transformation to really try and focus and prioritise on these things and what's the most important and where we need to invest to make sure that these things are completed.
Thank you.
Any comments from members or questions? Any further comments or questions? Councillor Hunt.
Just bear with me, please. I noticed that the Procurement Act is coming into force in February 2025, and that's going to impact on the asset management plan and all our procurement. So when I'm looking at the sort of due date of March 25, that's only a month down the road from the Act coming into force. Is that a realistic date?
Yeah, the procurement and contract management actions cover, I suppose, a multitude of actions. In In terms of the Act coming into force on the 31st of March, there are certain things that we need to have in place, one of them being amended contract and procurement rules. You may recall we brought them to Council and then the date of the implementation was put back. So we're kind of ready to go with that. We also have a job out for advert, I believe it's out for advert at the moment, for procurement manager in-house to be brought into the service. We are also approaching other service providers to support us in ongoing procurement delivery. All this is part of a project plan. It is timelines for completion by the 31st of March. So, yeah.
You're going to be busy.
We are busy, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy then to, if there's no more comments or questions from members, happy to move on. So we've got, I suppose we've taken item 8 and 9 there, haven't we? So if I read out the recommendations for both. So we've got the recommendations from item 8, which is members to note the implementation of the internal audit recommendations and the revised due date for incomplete recommendations. And then the further recommendations that members note the progress of delivery against the 2024-20. Have you done that bit? Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, I'm getting lost as that many recommendations. We'll do item 8 first, then we'll come to that then. So I've read out the item 8 recommendations. I'm happy to move them. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hunt, thank you. All those in favour? Thanks. So we'll move on then to the next bit, which Max is going to come to now, the internal audit progress report.
Thank you. The next paper is the internal audit progress report, which summarises our progress against the 2024-2025 internal audit plan, and also includes the executive summary of the cemeteries and pet cremation services audit that was done in the last quarter. There is an additional request from the committee from the cover page, which is at the bottom of page 2 of the progress report, which is changes to the internal audit plan. So apologies, didn't include that in the cover page. But essentially for the IT disaster recovery review, which was scheduled for Q4 of this year, we're asking the committee to approve to move that into the following year and bring forward parks and streets care, which was in the 3-year plan for next year. And this is principally to do the transformation work, which Fran alluded to, which is currently ongoing within the council, and actually getting the maximum value out of that review. We think the timing would be better to do that in the next year. So that's in addition to the recommendation, which is on the cover page of your report to note this report. I'll just move on to the table, which is on page 3 of the progress report. So this shows the delivery of the plan against what was scheduled. So you can see we've completed 3 reviews this year. One's out in draft. The remainder are in the field work phase or the scoping phase. And we do still expect to complete the plan by the end of the year and to provide our annual opinion, which will be in June time next year. And then the executive summary of the cemeteries and pet cremation services. This is for the review that was done in the last quarter just gone. We've provided substantial assurance over the control design and moderate assurance over the control effectiveness. So overall, that's a positive opinion. There was 1 medium finding raised and 3 low. So to focus on the medium finding, which was raised in this review, this essentially related to some of the gaps around KPIs for performance monitoring of the service, reconciliations of income received from the cemeteries and pet cremation services, and then the accuracy of some of the charging that was identified within our sample based on what's expected to be charged per the fee schedule versus what was actually charged to the customers. And some of this related to mileage not being charged for out-of-borough cremations, and also the travel that is part of those fees. There were other lower findings raised around the timing of payments received from customers. In some cases, for the pet cremation services, these were late and were sort of 6 months after the event. And then some of the challenges around staffing and resources for the service over the past 12 months or so. So that's a brief summary of that report and that review that was completed. There's also some details within the progress report around our sector update. So I won't go into detail on those reviews. I'll let you read those at your own leisure. And I'll stop there to take any questions at all on any of the contents from the progress report.
Okay, I'm now opening it up to members. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a micro point and then a macro point. Just looking at the cemeteries, I can see for the main cemeteries, it says you budgeted just over £500,000 for 24-25, which was a small decrease from the previous year. But on pet cremation services, it tells me what was generated, which was £84,000 in 23-24, but it doesn't say what the budget was for 24-25. I just wondered why that was. And then on a broader point, sorry, because I'm new to this committee, would we normally get budgets for the upcoming financial year? Would we be able to see them in this committee? And if so, when would we be likely to see them? Thank you.
Max, do you want to answer the bit that's relevant to you?
Yeah, so if I pick up the first question, I'll pass over probably to Tina for the second question. So to comment on the bit in terms of why is the budgeted income not in there, we've just kind of put what was actually generated for this period. We can add that outside of the committee to provide you the details of what was budgeted to give you the context. But I've not got, unfortunately, that information to hand, so I can provide that outside of committee if that's okay.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, budget doesn't actually come to audit committee. So budget monitoring goes to cabinet and council. And currently for this year, we do every 4 months we do a monitoring report, which is reported to cabinet and then to council.
Thank you, but if as a member of the committee or even I guess a member of the public wanted to see the budgets against performance on a quarterly basis, is that available? Okay.
On the intranet, on ModGov, what goes the reports that go to council to cabinet are published.
Okay, so, thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate the people running the pet cremation services that we've had a 4-fold increase in orders from between 2019-20 to date, which is really great news, and that we've got 5-star ratings on customer feedback across 156 Google reviews. So I thought that was absolutely fantastic. I wanted to put that out there. Also, just a strange question maybe, income from the cemetery has been reduced, is projected to be reduced. Why is that? Are more people being cremated, or we run out of land?
So yeah,
do you know why?
There's a couple of reasons for this. One is because some of our cemeteries are getting increasingly full now. So both Red Hill and Gedling are almost at capacity. I think it's Red Hill that we're only doing burials for people who have pre-purchased their plots, and we still quite have a lot of space at Colton. But that's one of the reasons. The other one is the introduction of private crematorium in Gedling, kind of like just up the road. A lot of people are moving towards being cremated and away from burials, and that's a national trend. And from my discussions with other councils, there's a similar thing happening there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Anything else from members or to ask questions about or make comments? No. Okay, thank you very much. I will move the recommendations that members to note the progress and delivery against 2024-2025 internal audit plan, including the executive summary of the following audit report, cemeteries and pet cremation services. I'm happy to move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Strong, thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, thank you. And now we'll move on. Oh, Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, Chair, was this a further recommendation on the changes to the 2045 plan?
I did read that out, I think, didn't I? Yeah. I think I read that out, yeah.
Page 51 that the gentleman referred to right at the beginning.
We've got another, oh,
Sorry, no.
have I? haven't
Sorry,
missed a
page
recommendation.
45. It's my mistake.
I can't see that. Oh, I thought I just read that out. That's what I just read out, wasn't it?
Today. Apologies if I've made a mistake.
No, I don't know if that, you've
No.
confused me now.
No, I think it was a further recommendation that Max had added verbally.
Verbally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're happy to accept the verbal
Yes,
recommendation
thank you.
that was made.
That's what I
yeah.
was getting at, yeah.
Members happy, thank you.
Thank you.
Now move on to item 10, which is the Corporate Risk Management Review, Quarter 2, 24-25. And I think, Tina, you're going to lead on. Oh, Fran, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So slightly different approach to the risk monitoring report in this quarter. I'm sorry to say it's not the finished perfect article, but we are in a process of change in terms of risk management and risk reporting. So committee will recall earlier in the year the new risk management framework, which was approved by this committee and then passed through to Cabinet for sign-off at the end of March. Proposed a new approach to the way that the council monitors, measures, scores risks across the organisation. Fundamental to that change was having a new risk management system so we could more effectively report risk through the organisation as part of our performance management tool. Ideagen is the system we use. A project team was established. As I say, the strategy was approved in March, and throughout quarters 1 and into quarter 2, the team have been looking at migrating risks onto the Pentana Ideagen system. There's also been a change to the corporate risks across the organisation. So a new set of corporate risks was agreed as part of that framework, and this report presents the new range of corporate risks to this committee. Then there hasn't been a significant shift in the risks that are being presented. Some of the titles have changed slightly, and some of the risks have been separated out to bring more focus to them. There is now a new corporate risk now around projects as well to make sure that we can track more effectively any risks that might arise out of key projects as they are ongoing. So whilst this report presents those new corporate risks to you and actions required to mitigate those risks, what you will notice is that there is no trend arrow in this report. So historically, we would tell you each quarter whether risks have gone up or down. Because effectively this is a new suite of corporate risks. This is the first reporting of those risks. So in the next quarter, you will be able to see that increase or decrease. What is explained to you in the report is that there was no change in risks levels in quarter 1 and no comparing new and old, which isn't always straightforward, no significant change in this quarter. However, you'll see that all the risks have been now scored against the new scoring mechanism. So it does give committee that kind of, I suppose, awareness of where we are organisationally across those risks. Now, as part of the risk framework, the council have adopted a moderate approach to risk. So that is our risk appetite as an organisation, which means that ideally all our risks should sit in that yellow category. Now, as you can see from the report, some of the risks are above that level, some are below, and that's where we need the actions in place to make sure that we are trying always to reduce that risk level to a more acceptable level across the organisation. I don't propose to take you through every single risk line by line unless you have particular questions on any of the risks presented. Tina will highlight just in terms of, I suppose, finance and fraud, where she has updated in relation to that. I hope what members will reflect and recognise is that there is an awful lot of work going on across the organisation at the moment, and there is an awful lot of work going on around governance. So looking to improve the risk process, looking to improve the procurement process, looking at fraud, looking at our policies, trying to improve those. And as well, it was referenced on the earlier item in relation to budget and performance. As an organisation, we have now a whole new structure in place in terms of how we are reporting meetings at an officer level. We are setting up a budget and performance board alongside various other boards that track projects risk across the organisation. Each of those is led by a member of our senior leadership team and relevant officers across the organisation. Again, it's trying to bring that connected council, so bringing all officers together so we're not all working in silos and we can more effectively track risks and performance across the whole organisation. In terms of the corporate risk register and what is presented to you, I shall leave the finance ones to Tina, but just skipping ahead. So in terms of capacity and service delivery, so no significant issues in Q2. I do expect there to be a slight increase in this risk going into the next quarter because we do have some capacity issues around waste services. Members will be aware we've reported previously about doing a base budget exercise in waste services to ensure that we can that we are effectively managing the service in terms of capacity against what is an ever-growing borough in terms of number of households and routes across the borough. So that is a piece of work that we are looking at the moment.
Can I just ask there, Brent, have there been any improvements? Because I know it's been on the risk register previous about the overspends.
Yeah.
It would just be good to get, is work, I can see work, you're saying work's going on, but,
yeah.
you know, is there any improvements do you know of?
Into this, well, Tina can probably better answer, but I did have a budget meeting this morning. So there are still overspends in environment. We have, there's a number of factors that are contributing to this. We have some issues with sickness. We have some issues with lack of capacity. As I say, I think there has been, I suppose, a failure to understand the impact of house growth within the borough. I think that the process of ensuring that we have sufficient staff to meet that ever-growing estate is something that hasn't been looked at in any great depth for quite some time, which has now meant that when you look at the rounds as we currently run them, that every day we are short in terms of the numbers of loaders and drivers we need. And then on top of that, when you factor in annual leave entitlement and levels of sickness we have, then that is something that we need to address. So we are addressing it. We are going to be, in fact, I'm taking a report into senior leadership tomorrow in terms of staffing in relation to that team to increase the level of staffing. As well in waste, we've got huge changes in legislation coming, and that is reflected in the risk under the legislation risk. We've got food collections coming. We've got changes to trade waste rounds, increases simpler recycling. There's a lot of work that needs to happen in that waste space, and that is going to require investment. So, you know, in terms of overspend, it continues, as I say, at the moment, but I think when we realign the budgets and we understand exactly what our staffing need is, I think it is recognised by everyone in the council that there needs to be some investment in that area, because the overspend is, to a degree, reflective of just lack of, you know, lack of capacity, which has meant we've had to buy an extra agency to support. We've had to buy an agency in the garage because of issues there. So it's, yeah. Sorry, I lost where I was then for a minute. No, absolutely no. We touched on capacity earlier, and we talked about, I think in 23-24 in the statement of accounts, about ability to recruit, particularly in professional fields. I think what has been positive is that following the senior management restructure, we have managed to recruit to all posts across that. So there is still one role still to start. I know that there are some particular pinch points. I know in financial services, not always as straightforward to recruit into jobs. We currently have a procurement job and shortly a legal job out at the moment. So we'll see how we fare in terms of those. But certainly, we have been looking at succession planning. There was a new workforce plan approved. We have, as Tina mentioned, we have a new assistant director in relation to workforce, and she is looking at a variety of the council's staffing policies to see where there might be scope to improve, to perhaps, again, advertise Gedling as a great place to work and really encourage people in to come and apply for jobs at the council. So lots of work going on there. In terms of health and safety at work, so we have a system called the AssessNet system. Rebecca Hutchinson, who is our health and safety manager, has recently done a lot of work with managers to ensure that they are reviewing and keeping those risk assessments up to date. We have a lot of new managers within the organisation as well, so they need to make sure that they understand what it is they are risk assessing and responsible for. Again, in waste services, some really positive work done. So all risk assessments and safe systems of work have been reviewed and across waste services and new ones introduced, which is a really positive piece of work. And they are rolling out reinduction of all drivers and loaders in those new safe systems and work and risk assessments, which is a really positive piece of work that's ongoing. Environmental services, so we received the business continuity corporate business continuity plan into SLT last week. I think it was last week, which is a really good, positive piece of work, and quite a big piece of work. It's taken a lot of engagement from managers across the organisation. We have a workshop next week at SLT to look at prioritisation of services. So in the event of a business continuity issue, which services corporately would we prioritise in terms of getting them back on track first, and that will then feed into the ICT prioritisation because they will need to ensure that the systems are up and running. So that workshop is happening, I think, the first week in January. So again, ongoing work there. We touched on procurement as well. So under the contractual and partnerships risk, we have set dates in March for the new procurement processes, new procurement rules, new procurement strategy, improvements to our contracts register, contract management training and procurement training has been delivered. So Natalie Osai has been delivering a series of training to staff, so they are aware of what is coming in terms of Procurement Act changes and how to ensure that we follow the rules and make sure that it's done effectively. So that's been ongoing. I said I wasn't going to go through them all, and now I am going through them all. Apologies. In terms of ICT and data, so again, as you're aware, we've had some significant changes, I suppose, in staffing and management around ICT across the organisation as part of our transformation project. There's a lot of work going on with our ICT team at the moment, a lot of kind of, I suppose, deep diving into risks, systems, priorities. So that's quite a positive piece of work, but it may be that the risk level increases slightly as always when you start to really pull things apart and get, really sort of dig deep into things. There may be some areas where we identify an increase in risk, but that's positive because we need to understand where we are so that we can improve. The projects, as I mentioned, is a new risk area. So we are looking at new templates for project management. Projects will be now reporting through these boards that I talked about earlier. So we will have a better corporate oversight of risks coming out of projects, and they will be put into the system and fed through. I think that's about it for me. I will hand over to Tina if there's anything particular you wanted to add.
So the first corporate risk, CR1, on the front of that risk register is around finance. Now, you'll remember that we used to have two corporate risks talking about finance. They've now kind of like been merged into one. So this risk is really about the council's ability to meet its financial commitments. And it relates to income and expenditure and to budgetary pressures and efficiencies and our ability to produce a medium-term plan and a balanced budget going forward. Now, this risk is always going to be on the high side. We've had lots of years of underfunding. We don't yet have a settlement, which is hopefully coming next week. We're currently working up our budget for next financial year, but we do have quite a lot of controls in place for this. So we have our quarterly monitoring budget process. We look at new efficiency programs every year to see how we can deliver things more effectively and more efficiently. We look to set a balanced budget. We have the business partnering approach in our finance section, where we have business partners that work with departments to try and ensure that the services that they deliver are value for money, low cost, but can still deliver their corporate objectives. We have financial regulations, annual reviews, council tax reduction scheme, and also capacity and qualification, qualified experienced staff to help us control that risk. So we're currently in the process of setting our budget for 25-26 and the next medium-term financial plan. That will be completed in February. It should go to Cabinet in February and full council in March. As part of that, we will be looking to agree a new set of efficiencies for delivery from next financial year onwards. And also we're working really closely with departments and service areas to try and operate within their set budget envelopes. So the risks that we currently have around there, so we have a medium-term financial plan that's very heavily predicated on a significant amount of efficiencies that we need to deliver over the medium term, so that's over the next 5 years. Some of those are at quite a high level, so we don't have set plans to deliver those yet, so that's something that we need to kind of like work on really quickly over the next 12 months. We still have uncertainty on government funding, and the new government. The settlement will be coming on the 19th of November. So hopefully we'll have some clarification around that and what we're getting in terms of our financial... Sorry, what did I say? 19th of December. So we should get some clarity around what that will be. We've talked about other overspends in the Environment Department, mainly around staffing and agency use. We've started a zero-based budget approach, looking at actually what we need to deliver that service. And it's a really, really chunky piece of work because we don't currently have a waste system. We've just recently procured one, I think, so that will help us a lot with that data. But without that real data, it's really difficult to work out exactly what you need to deliver your current level of service. So I think it has been quite historical that we've just had a budget incremental approach every year, where we've added a percentage onto budgets. We're now looking at these areas of high risk and looking actually what do we need, what staff do we need, how can we make them perform more effectively, but have sufficient staff to deliver those services. So quite a lot of work going on around finance. The score there is serious consequence and probable, because, as I say, we do have a lot of risks around the medium-term financial plan and efficiencies that we need to deliver. Hopefully we will see that reduce over the medium-term plan. I do not expect that to come down drastically over the next 12 months or even 24 months, as we really do have some significant financial pressures that we need to deal with going forward. So the other one that I will talk about is the fraud one, and that is CR11 on page 72 of the pack. So this is what I meant to say is these corporate risks, it's not just one risk. We have a whole set of departmental risks sitting underneath these corporate risks, and they're not just sitting in finance, they're sitting all across departments, and they'll be scored by risk holders in each department, and the scores that they give their departmental risks will influence that corporate risk score. So on fraud, this relates to improper actions committed against the council, either internally or by third parties, and includes fraud, bribery, money laundering and misconduct, theft and falsification of timesheets, all kind of things like that. So we have a number of controls in place. We've got the counter-fraud strategy, the whistleblowing policy, we have a fraud action plan, we have internal audit, we have external audit, both of who are here today. We have you as audit committee who are charged with the governance of these things. We have mandatory sorry, I can't get my words, mandatory staff training around fraud, which we introduced last year, I think it was. We take a zero tolerance towards approach towards fraud, and we communicate that to our staff regularly. And we also have members' roles and conduct and public contracts and national fraud initiatives, all about our controls. We've got a number of actions that we need to take towards the end of the financial year. So we need to renew our anti-fraud strategy, and we need to look at including actions from that revised strategy in our fraud action plan for delivery going forward. We're starting to monitor the take-up of that mandatory training. We're at 75% at the moment of the staff who actually have access to a computer because it is online training, but we're also looking at how we can get to those more difficult to reach staff, so staff that work down at the depot, you know, your waste guys and your leisure centre staff, your instructors. We need to try and reach those a bit more. So we're looking to increase the take-up of that, but we have been monitoring it quite closely. So we've got some in-person training sessions coming up. We're also so as part of the fraud that happened in our core financial system, so we have other financial systems, particularly around housing and benefits, and what we want to make sure that those systems are robust and those internal controls are robust. So we're actually undertaking a piece of work to have a forensic analysis undertaken of those financial systems, just to make sure that those internal controls are tight and there's nothing for us to be worried about, and that will be happening over the next 3 to 6 months. So we'll be able to report on that next year to you. So the current score on this again is serious consequence and probable, and that's just because of the recent fraud. So we have taken that quite seriously, and we are doing a lot of work. We don't want to lower our risk rating quite yet, but I do expect to see that come down over the next 12 months as we go through some of those actions. Happy to take any questions?
Any comments or questions from members? I was going to ask a question, but you covered it, Tina, around the fraud, around mandatory training, just around making sure that sort of the members of staff have access. But I can see that you're going to be putting on sessions for members who don't have computer access, which is really good. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask if there was a target date for completing the training. Have there been any obstructions to doing it? Have there been any problems getting it done?
So there's no target date because it's ongoing. So as we have, because it's mandatory, and I think it's every couple of years. So as we have new people come in, there'll always be an element of people who haven't undertaken it, especially when we've had big staff reviews and lots of new staff coming in. But there is quite a tight timescale. I think it's within the first 3 months, 3 to 6 months. But I'll find out that for you for definite of staff starting to undertake the training. What we have started doing is getting a list of staff who haven't undertaken it, and we are going out and kind of like chasing those up now. What I have found though very recently is that some staff think they've undertaken it, but there's a little bit right at the end, almost like a completion bit. So you can do the training because it's online. If you don't do that little completion bit, it will register you as not having undertaken it. So I do know that there's a particular member of staff who says, well, I've done this twice now, and it's because they haven't done that final bit. So we are looking at that to make sure that that it's very clear exactly what they need to do. But yeah, it's ongoing.
Any other comments or questions from members? Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably a question for Fran. The ICT one does interest me at the moment, going through the process at Loughborough University and regards to cybersecurity. And we know there are a lot of kind of hostile players out there, hostile states in terms of cyber attacks, and particular cyber attacks on the public sector. I noticed there's new AD starting, and this person will obviously look at risk levels and the rest of it. I'm just wondering whether that current risk score should be higher. Bear in mind there has been quite a few cyber attacks in the public sector in general across the country, and wonder whether we are happy with that, or will that be reviewed when this new AD starts?
Sorry, Tina's scribbling something on mine. You can come in with that if you like. As I say, I think probably when we look at risks into quarter three, because the new AD started right at the end of quarter two, and this is quarter two's report, I think there might be a change in that risk level, which is what I was identifying earlier, because that kind of deep dive work that they're doing to properly look at these things. And we are aware, I suppose, cybersecurity is a risk nationally or against organisations like ours is something that we, of course, we do take into account when we're looking at the overall threat level across the country and risks associated with it. And part of the work we're doing at the moment is really prioritising as well. So in terms of system patching, security, all those kind of things to make sure that we are absolutely prioritising the more vulnerable systems. As I say, I suspect that risk level will go up next quarter when that new AD is properly looking at all the risks across the organisation and looking at that workload and priority. Our ICT team are fantastic, but part of the whole investment and transformation was that we recognised it was, I suppose, inadequate again in terms of capacity to really, look at all these things in the depth that they absolutely need to be looked at.
Just ask a follow-up question, Chair. And will there be mandatory training, do you think, for staff on cyber security in general?
There is currently mandatory training for cyber security. It's the same principle as the fraud, so it's part of the induction process, and it's an online training that staff are required to complete. Yeah, I don't have the completion rates, but I could find that out for the next committee. Yeah.
So something that's recently come in at quarter three, so it's not in this report. So one of the ways that you mitigate against any kind of risk is by having insurance. Now, cyber insurance it has been really difficult to get hold of in the market. Not many people want to insure you for it, but we have managed to, our brokers have found an insurance company who will insure us for cyber risk, and we have actually just recently taken out that insurance. And I think it starts this month, I believe. So we will have some level of insurance going forward.
Great, thank you very much.
First, I've got Councillor Hughes, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually following on from the same thing, and I think it occurs to me that one of the advantages of having a new AD in for IT is he's looking at everything with a fresh pair of eyes. So he's going to perhaps identify additional risks that we hadn't spotted, which is understandable and actually almost recommended, I suppose, always a very good idea. Just following on, I understand, obviously, we've got the mandatory training, but cyber risks are changing and increasing all the time. So is there regular communication of newly identified risks or threats to relevant members of staff?
There is communication. Interestingly, we talked about this at our data security group the other day, just in terms, so we do... we used to run more regular, I suppose, phishing exercises and those kind of tests on staff and indeed on members as well, just to make sure that people were, I suppose, staying on top of it. What our ICT team are saying that actually in terms of reporting irregularities on our ICT system, the reporting rate is really good. So in terms of people spotting something that they're not quite sure about from officers and indeed in members as well. So we had a report recently from a member who'd had something that just didn't look quite right. And they were asking for information and it was flagged through to our ICT department. We do get ICT alerts regularly through email when it sort of flashes when it's staff, you need to, come off this system or you need to do this thing. So we do have communication in that way. But again, I think probably the cybersecurity training is something that we perhaps need to refresh. It's okay as a generic training tool and it certainly raises awareness. But again, in terms of sort of testing and, communicating in a more effective way around some of those things, I think that's absolutely something that we do need to look at. Thank you.
Just coming back on that, do we buy in external training for that kind of work, or is it something that we build into, as you say, our?
Yeah, well, historically, since my involvement in ICT, it's been done internally. So those kind of phishing exercises were run just as an internal thing, as far as I'm aware. The training itself is an external. It's an online training that's provided by a is it, I can't remember the name of the system now. Meritech, thank you, Gina. That's on there, and then it's just Gedlingized a little bit with some of the stuff. But, you know, I think, as Councillor Hughes has alluded to, having that kind of new external eye in our ICT team with our new director, Dan, it is really helpful to get that sort of refresh and, you know, look at, and, you know, to look at things in a different way, and certainly in terms of investing in external training and something that might well be something that we need to look at, yeah.
Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hughes is quite right about highlighting the increase of attempts to scam people. And bearing in mind what others have said, would there be any point in perhaps councillors having the same training?
Absolutely. I'm only pausing because I wasn't sure whether it was part of the training timetable, but absolutely that online training, because it's provided for equalities as well to members. It's the same platform that's used for both lots of training. So we can certainly send that link out to members.
Thank you. I was just bearing in mind the different levels of abilities. We're all different people with different experiences.
Yeah.
So we can't really take these things for granted at the present time.
Absolutely. I think my memory's slowly kicking in. I think there was some face-to-face cybersecurity training done after the last election. It was combined with GDPR. But in terms of a refresher, it's absolutely, I think the online training would be useful.
Okay, any other comments or questions from members on this? I think that was a good discussion. No? Okay, so all the recommendations are that we note the current risk level and actions identified within the corporate risk register. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hunt, thank you. Everyone happy with that? All those in favour? Yeah, thank you very much. I believe that's the end of the meeting. There are no other urgent items, and I'm happy to move the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.